We just have to be honest. I mean, it is what it is.
Well, maybe next time, maybe next time, we're taking a break, we'll figure that out.
Or, I mean, again, it's like the loan thing, it's like, you know, we want to lifting her up too, so, I don't know, I think these are all or nothing kind of thing.
Yeah,
Take a break, or we don't.
okay. No, I'm fine with that.
No, it's exactly what we were talking about with the Tuesday class. Takes a break. We'll probably go another couple of weeks and then
Before you take a break.
We're talking about the
The
prayer
kids
kisses.
weekly prayer Christmas, we decided to take a break.
Because so many people are out, and it's hard to get, not hard to get participation, but we have less over the summer, because people are out so much.
Yeah, and it's hard for us to keep up with where it's at. We use your break. If I'm gonna.
Let's be honest.
Let's get real honest.
I mean, it seems like such a simple thing, but there's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, okay, we're done. We're good, we're
All or nothing.
Okay, got it. Start again later.
Okay, Miles, you have so many friends that you bring. I know.
How are you? I'm good.
You know, ready to.
I had my first graduation today from Veritas. It's like a smaller one, and then next week's the official big graduation. So, but as of now, I'm still doing homework.
There you go.
That's the only thing I cared about. No more homework. So, very excited. Very, very excited.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's unspoken. We know it's there, but I'm gonna not think about it until I have to worry about it.
Or,
How you doing? Evening, Jim.
how you doing?
I'm not gonna like them like that.
I don't either. You don't want to, but I'm not gonna lie, but it's good.
You're gonna lead up what? Okay, good. Look forward to that.
How's it going?
Sorry.
All right, I'm gonna get started. Sorry, we're running a tad late. So,
What time is it?
sorry,
What time?
we are in Matthew 20. All right. I'm gonna ask Adam to say a prayer for us, and we'll get started.
Let's bow together. Our God, we're thankful for this Wednesday evening to set aside our minds to study your word. We pray that we do so in a way that honors you, that glorifies you, and that increases our knowledge about you. We pray that we are willing to share what we learn to those around us. We pray that you'll help Clay to remember what he studied and to speak wisely, to remember that we are your children, and we pray, dear God, that we have the ability to share your word in a way that helps others to have love in their hearts, and then to be able to share it to someone else as well. We pray that your will be done always. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. So we're finishing up our lesson on choosing to serve. The lesson comes out of Matthew chapter 20. Come on in, everybody. We're out of the book. Lessons out of Matthew chapter 20. The story of, there's the last part of that chapter. There's the story of the mother of James and John, Mrs. Zebedee, who we're called in the second class. What she's trying to get for her son to sit at the right hand of Jesus. And she's asking for one thing, has a complete misunderstanding of what she's actually asking for. And Jesus takes that time to really talk to them and her about what true greatness actually is and about being a servant. Instead of what she's asking for, which is a national position in the kingdom, thinking that they're going to be at the right hand of a king, of a ruler. And this is the idea of that's not what greatness actually is. Greatness is actually being a servant, making yourself low and humble yourself and being a servant. And so that's where the class was. Talked about a couple of different ideas, about what greatness is, about celebrity and that kind of thing, and being a servant. Instead of that, talked about what greatness is not about. And so tonight we're going to pick up there at the end of greatness is not about praise. Talked about that a little bit, and we moved into the section towards the end of that. Greatness is about serving. So we talked about what it ain't, talked about now what it is. So we're kind of shifting gears and talk about what greatness actually is. Make sure I have my notes in the right spot. Yes, greatness is about being a servant. Goes into the idea of the Corinthian letter that Paul wrote to the Corinthian church. And what is that whole book about in totality, I guess? What is the Paul's letter to the Corinthians about?
Division.
About division, among other things, but yeah. What else? Anything else? It's kind of had a lot of things.
Tolerating sin.
Tolerating sin is one of them. Yeah, they had a lot of things off. They were not doing things that they should be doing and not being the type of people that they had initially, I won't say, signed up for to be a Christian. They kind of gotten off track from what they were supposed to be. So Paul's letter to them is about a lot of different things, about just trying to get them back on track and doing the right things, and that's kind of where this jumps off for us. Turn over to 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Let's look at what Paul is like, again, trying to correct the Corinthian brethren and what they've become and where they need to get back to, and he tries to steer that ship, and he calls himself, gives himself a title of servant. We'll read some of these passages, but we'll talk about also what he refers to everybody else. So it kind of speaks to Paul's, his thought process and his mentality towards other people, other Christians. I don't think we really do a good job of that. That's my opinion anyway. We don't do a good enough job of, thinking of other people like that here in the church. So I kind of want to read about what he calls himself, how he refers to himself, and then kind of make us, think about how that applies to me. What's that? Sure. Like pink? Did it for you. It's part of my spring collection. So, in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 5, I'll back up to verse 1. And I, brethren, cannot speak to you as to spiritual people, but as to carnal, as to babes in Christ. I fed you with milk and not with solid food, for until now you were not able to receive it. And even now you are still not able. For you are still carnal, for there were envy, strife, and divisions among you. Are you not carnal and behaving like mere men? For when one says, I am of Paul, and another, I am of Apollos, are you not carnal? And in verse 5 it says, who then is Paul, and who is Apollos, but ministers through whom you believed, as the Lord gave to each one. I think some of the translations say servant. Anybody else's translations say servant there? Yeah, ESV. Yeah. So ESV calls him a servant, and the New King James that I have here is a person with a minister, but it's the same idea. So how does he refer to himself? Why does he kind of bring him back to his own, what he's calling himself? Why is that important? Why is it getting off base, I guess, from that? That's about the idea behind who is Paul, who is Apollos, what kind of regard have they held Paul and Apollos in up to this point?
Pretty high regard. They
Yeah.
were, instead of following Christ, they were saying, I follow Christ, I follow Apollos, I follow Paul. Yes, he's reminding them that he's a servant.
Yeah, they kind of had their whole view was kind of skewed, and they were looking at Paul and Apollos kind of in a way more importantly than Jesus in a lot of ways. That's kind of how I look at it. And Paul's kind of reminding him, that's not how this is supposed to go. I'm just a servant. But who's Paul trying to replicate? Who's trying to mimic and copy? This is pattern. By Christ, right? So he's just reflecting it back to Christ. Which again, okay, ask yourself, how does that impact me? How am I doing with that myself? Something we need to all think about. Each of these lessons, obviously, about choosing to serve here in particular. How do I see myself? Am I something, grandiose in the church, or am I just a servant? I think we all need to keep that in mind as we go through this lesson, obviously. Another passage, chapter, he does it several times, chapter 4, the same book, chapter 4, verse 1, let a man so consider us as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. There's several verses that we go through here. He refers to himself as a servant or a minister. 1 Corinthians 9:19, 2 Corinthians 4:5, 6:4, 11:23. He's got several listed here, Galatians, Philippians, and Titus. When he wrote to Timothy about being a gospel preacher, he reminded him to be a servant. So turn over first to 1 Timothy chapter 4. Real quick, want to read that. So he's also not referring to himself as a servant, but he's also talking to Timothy as well. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 6. What's the relationship between Paul and Timothy?
Mentor, mentee.
So Paul had a special place in heart for Timothy, right? So you read here in verse 6 that even though he held Timothy in some kind of a special regard, what does he still call him and tries to bring him back down to earth? He says, if you instruct the brethren in these things, there, verse 6, you will be a good minister of Jesus Christ, nourished in the words of faith and of the good doctrine which you have carefully followed. So again, the idea of, I think mine says minister, but other passages, other translations, call the servant as well. So that idea of just reminding Timothy what your job actually is, you're supposed to be a servant. He says, if you instruct the brethren in these things, you'll be a good minister of Jesus Christ, a servant, nourished in the words of faith and of the good doctrine which you have carefully followed. So just reminding me again, you're a servant. That's your job. You're a servant. And also one point on this, Romans chapter 16 is one other place I want to read real quick. Romans chapter 16, verse 1, another title that he gives, that same title to other Christians, which I kind of where I want to make sure we're kind of hovering around that tonight, that idea of thinking of ourselves and others as servants, which again is the idea of this whole class is choosing to be a servant, choosing to serve. And, Romans chapter 16, verse 1. I commend you to Phoebe, our sister, who is a servant of the church in Cyprus. We're people that you've known in the past that maybe have passed on, your grandparents, other friends, whoever, family members that have passed on, give a certain idea in their mind about who they were as a person, their heart. I had a grandma that was, somebody who laughed a lot. She was a servant. She would, work herself to the bone, cooking for people and doing those kind of things. In my mind, she was a servant. And that's kind of how Phoebe is here in this passage for all time. Paul thought of her as a servant. I commend you to Phoebe, our sister, who is a servant of the church. How does that impact us? How does that impact me? What am I doing? Have that kind of recognition, not for the recognition's sake, obviously, talk about that Sunday as well, but am I that kind of person that's going to be known as being a servant here in the church? We're going to get more to that idea about what that actually means, practically speaking, here in the rest of this lesson. But I think that's something we all need to think about ourselves. What am I doing to be a servant for others, for the church, obviously for people outside the church, but more importantly, people within the church? It's something we just kind of lose focus on, I believe.
Hey, Clay. This kind of makes me think of this Romans 16 passage, calling a colleague in your company and saying, hey, I've got somebody moving your way. Let me tell you about it, right? If somebody calls me and says, hey, I got somebody who wants to move there, they're really kind of difficult to deal with. They're really focused on themselves, and they really don't care about anybody around them. They're looking for the glory. Like, keep them, like, nice, right? But in this scenario, it's you got somebody who's going to work, right? They're willing to work. They're going to put their head down. They're not going to look for fanfare. They're not going to try to elevate themselves above others. Like, absolutely. So,
And what does being a servant actually mean, right? Is it just a title? Well, it's a title that has weight behind it because you actually did things to earn that title. Serving somebody who puts everybody ahead of themselves. That's kind of the what Phoebe has, made a name for herself in that way, that she puts the people of the church in a priority over herself to make them better, make sure they have what they need. Any questions or comments on that?
Let me give you an example.
Absolutely.
There's a young couple transferring to another congregation. Got it this week. They didn't feel welcome. A young couple.
They came here?
Yeah. Road.
Okay.
Not road. Whatever that. But I didn't do my job really good. But, we're so busy, like, going to visit with each other, that we forget about those that, don't know anybody. They moved here, it's cold, hardest, and we just don't do what we need to do. Now, there's no reason they should have left. No reason at all. So what's the Lord gonna do when we get up to heaven?
We're all going to get asked if we did our part.
Did you do your part, Phil? And you're gonna ask me about that. And what am I gonna say?
We're all going to answer for it. Did we do our job being a servant? We'll talk about this idea again, in more detail, but like it's a deeper thing other than just being nice to people. It's the idea of, again, putting people ahead of you and putting them as a priority over your own. It's something we don't do a good enough job of. I think, we may get judged for on that if we're not doing our part to make other people feel welcome, especially members of the church. That's a problem for us. We're going to be judged on it, I believe.
My cousin's in the hospital, and it's probably 120 days now. And we walked and we sat down out in the hallway, and we just so happened to sit by the elevator. I don't know if it was 10 or more people came to him and either fist bumped or spent a few minutes with him. And I was encouraged.
Strangers or people that he knew, you think?
It's people that he knew that he's made a connection with, and they're seeing his example of the way he's responded to them. Now, he doesn't always respond well. It's bad, he's in a bad situation. But I was just sitting there thinking, what he was serving, even though he was not in a position or a place you would think he could serve. And I thought, wow, he's making a difference, and we don't think that we can make that small of a difference. It's like speaking to somebody, or whatever. Yes,
Really?
yes, yes. When I was younger,
Made a
I
turn,
was
right?
more, I said that.
Yeah.
And I decided that wasn't right.
Yep. Mid-turn and doing the right thing. Yeah, I think to your point, I think we take into, I think we think being a servant means big things and doing a lot of big moves that, may or may not be noticed, but we forget the little things, right?
Right.
Send somebody just a text and say, hey man, how you doing? Feeling okay? That's a small thing, but it can be a small thing for you to do it, but maybe a huge thing for somebody else. And just being a servant, hey, can I bring you something to eat? Can I come sit with you? I think Job's friends were on the right track, coming to sit with him in silence until they started talking. That's when it went off the rails. They started talking over their mouth, that's when it went downhill, but to that point, they were doing the right thing by just coming, taking time out of their busy lives to come and just sit with him and just be there. That's just being there was a big thing for him, but then like the downhill after that when they started talking. So, yeah, it's a big thing. Turn to Matthew chapter 18. This idea of what Jesus, kind of Jesus says here about being the greatest. I'm going to read verses 1 through 4 of chapter 18. 1 through 5.
At that time, the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And calling to him a child, he put him in the midst of them and said, "Truly, I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me."
So I've read this for years, obviously, and I've just kind of always struggled with it. Kind of like what does it mean to become like a child? Like it says a lot of things, I think, but sometimes kind of also hard to quantify, I guess. But what does that mean? What kind of characteristics of children are we talking about here?
They're innocent.
Humility, vulnerability.
And their willingness to listen. They may, I know we've all felt that when it's like hard to get up to like their full attention, because it does happen. But overall, I've noticed that as working with elementary students, the younger children, they are listening to you. Even if you're not talking to them directly, you may be over here talking to someone else, but they listen to you, and that's it, and they watch you.
Yep. They take in a lot more than we give them credit for.
And that's the first step in salvation, is being willing to listen.
Yep, that's a great point. All those things are definitely true. I think kids don't know that about themselves. I think, which is kind of, to me, one of the points of this lesson, that they don't know that about themselves, but how good it is to be innocent, how good it is to be nice to nearly everybody. Some kids are kind of mean, but you get the point. The analogy breaks down at some point, but having that kind of a oblivious mindset, they don't know how good it is to be a kid, how innocent they are, how pure they are. I think that's also part of that innocence that comes into that. So I think it's one of the characteristics here. I think it's what Jesus is talking about. Yeah.
I'll comment on two kids in here, Alex and Zeke. If you're in a class with them and you talk, they're the only two that are really, I mean, maybe the rest of them are listening, I'm sure they are, but they're always looking at you. When you're talking to them, they're looking at you, and they're listening in their conversation, and so somewhere between where they are and where they'll get someday, it may change.
It's going to do a lot of this.
So many kids do that, but they're neat ones to look at.
Yep. Appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I think we forget how we need to always try to steer our mind back to being like that. Try to be as innocent as possible. Try to think of, think of yourself like a kid in a lot of ways and put other people ahead of yourself. Some kids are really good about sharing, not all of them. Some kids are really good about giving things to other people. If they see another sad kid, they're going to bring them a toy. I mean, that's just sometimes how kids are. So I think that's kind of that idea that comes along with this. There's a lot that's said in these 5 passages, but I think we all need to remind ourselves to be humble. I think that's the key word here. Kids are usually always very humble. Usually always, if that makes sense. But speaking in general specifics there. But kids are usually humble. Something we all need to remind ourselves constantly. That's how Jesus was. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Oh, yeah.
You're ignoring our time.
This is my A side, and this is.
One of the main things that children will do children at all, children will fight, they'll get into arguments and all. The parents get involved, and they look out while they're having words, and the kids are out playing with each other.
Just forget about it and go on.
And, you know, we adults have a little bit more trouble with that one, but that's what I always think about with children.
Some kids don't have that pride. They're usually humble, and that pride, when the pride enters in, it's when they start getting their feelings hurt more like adults do, and we take it personally, like,
Well, they know that you're supposed to carry it on.
Yeah.
And they're very different.
Yeah.
I tell you an example of that all of us have fallen into.
What's that?
Sports. Baseball. Your son plays second base. He's not real good.
I get this place like Go ahead.
But he sits on the bench tomorrow.
Yep.
He starts today, but tomorrow he sits on the bench. And you and mom are just stupid. Let's get over that. And that happens over and over and over. And I hear this happens to people in this room.
Am I sitting by?
Well,
Occasionally you can.
fortunately, I was fortunate I didn't have to do that, but that happened. And I've had some parents that, you know, come on. I thought I'm not saying something insurance, now
That's a good point. Yeah, parents, take those things like I said, a lot more seriously than, the kids do sometimes. Kids would take it seriously, there's a lesson to be learned there. But adults sometimes forget the lesson that's supposed to have been learned by the kids and, take it way too seriously. Guilty of that myself, we've all been there. So yeah, definitely, something to be reminded of. Thank you for that. I want to read real quick Matthew chapter 20, verse 26. We'll page over. So Jesus is going to reminding them about what grace. The whole passage there is what we should be reading possibly both. So let's skip it just for now. Again, getting back to that idea of what Mrs. Zebedee, James and John's mom was going after. Remember, 26 says, "The others shall not be so among you, but whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant." So that's it. That's Jesus' definition of what greatness actually is not being anything high and mighty, which he had every right to call himself. He could have been all kinds of high and mighty, but he says greatness is actually being a servant. And that was his way of correcting their mom and telling them what you're asking isn't the right thing. What you're asking for you don't want. But greatness isn't a position, it's being a servant. And he's trying to remind them to flip your idea of what the world tells you is greatness is not what I say is great. He says what greatness is being a servant. And that's what the whole church is. The church is the opposite of what the world is, right? We say it's good, the church says it's not. The church says it's good, the world says it's bad. It's not that. And that's kind of how Jesus was. But the world thought it was to be a king and be great is one thing, but what Jesus was something the complete opposite. It's about being a servant. That's how he lived his life. That's from day one all the way through. I want to get into this probably a little more practical for us here in number 2 on page 52. Life as a Christian is nothing until you learn to serve. Let's talk about this, I guess, in practical terms. A few bullet points that he wrote out here. I think it's probably relevant to us, but for the others, let's talk about what we have. One of them, he said, is teaching Bible class and helping others learn. I think we all have to, again, have that idea of church about when I come to church looking for what I can do to be served, and what can I get out of church, or what can I give to others and put into church? Get church is being people, obviously, but what can I get into being here with my brethren? What can I give to them? What can I do to serve other people over here? And it's just kind of the idea of what some of the tasks that we have here at church, as part of our family. We can't hire a lot of this stuff out. We can't hire in Bible class teachers. We can't hire in people that do prayers and lead singing and do the Lord's Supper. We probably could, but we're not going to do that. we got to take care of ourselves. So the first bullet point, teach Bible class and helping others learn. So let's ask the question. How does that impact me? Yes, sir.
And by the way, we do need volunteers.
Good timing. He's drafting.
We filled up next quarter, but the quarter after next, there's a lot of holes in this. So take this lesson to heart, please.
Fixing to has to come in and be a teacher. It may not be a skill that you have. That's not a skill that I possess myself, to be honest with you. Song leading, not everybody has that kind of a talent or that kind of a skill. You don't want to throw somebody up there and say, well, do it anyway. Kind of want to be, done right. There's obviously various levels of what right is for doing song leading. So we'll do both arms and one arm, whatever, but we do no arms at all. But this idea of, what can you do to be a teacher in class? That's just one of the things that we do here. Are you able to teach? Do we have to be great teachers?
Well, speaking from someone like I was working in elementary school, I didn't start off as that great. I don't really consider myself to be great now, but I have seen improvement.
Well, good.
I said after.
You're coming along. That's working.
Exactly. And, being willing to go in there and I think I said this before, I said it's not glamorous. Working I said with the kids is not glamorous. Working with the system, with their parents, none of that I said is glamorous. But you keep on, I said, going. And you do see, I said, things getting better. I said, with both of the students and inside of you. I said, there's still students that I couldn't really get them to pay attention, couldn't get them to learn as much as they are capable of. But we've built a peaceful relationship, respectful. I said, and since I'm having to leave this school and go somewhere new, I said next year, that's very, I said that's an accomplishment because,
You just start off that way, right? Now you're at that level where you have some accomplishments.
and having to learn that, just having to learn to stick with it. That's what life is all about. Like you were saying in the sermon, I said last Sunday, just have to keep up the pressing on.
Yep.
And just keep on working and things have to get better.
So here's a question for all of us, and yourself included, I guess, is what kind of excuses do I make for not doing anything on this list? Teaching Bible class, visiting an elderly member at the nursing home, preparing the Lord's Supper, cleaning. Do which one?
Preparing the Lord's Supper.
I do that. I'd be happy to help get you in there. We'll draft you and get you in. But I mean, like, what kind of excuses do we make for this list? Like, why am I not a teacher?
I'm busy.
I'm busy.
Not smart enough.
Not smart enough. He definitely ain't. So. He's very, very intelligent.
I'm
doing great.
I don't know how to do that.
I mean, like Carrie and John and Luke has all had a part, and maybe somebody else has had a part in scheduling teachers. And is it easy? It's that's probably the most challenging job in church is trying to find people to teach. He's a servant trying to find people to be more servant. That's been a servant role and teach for only 2 weeks. And it's like pulling teeth, right? I mean, how many people we have in this building that are able to teach? I'm not saying they're great teachers or they're like, trained professionals, but I mean, like, able to do it. Everybody. Right? You can open this Bible and you can read it. You can you can communicate this message to other people. You're a teacher. Right? Not saying it's got to be great. That's just one of those things we try to make excuses for why I can't do it. I'm busy. I'm not smart enough. I don't know the material well enough. Yeah.
There's a couple sides to this. The serving others. One, obviously, is work humanity, right? And that's priority for sure. But I remember hearing someone give advice one time for those who are dealing with hurt or sadness or self-loathing or depression or things like that. And the advice was go serve somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Go serve somebody else, because you can't serve somebody else and think about your own problems, because you're thinking about them. You're thinking about what you're doing. And that's always been some advice that's hit home to me. And I've seen it in practice. I've seen people who have been dealing with the worst of the worst heartache, loss of a spouse. And before you know it, they're out serving somebody else. And you see that the impact that has, obviously, on the people that they're serving, but also on them. Like, it's good for you, too.
Yep, that's a good point. I think the point for me personally on this is, I mean, do I have all the best talent in the world for any of these topics and others? Obviously, no, but what excuses do I make that prevent me from stepping into this servant role and helping out on whatever it is? I couldn't say I'm the greatest song leader because I'm not. Something I personally would need to work on. But doesn't mean that I can't, put those excuses off to the side and
I may not know as much of the Bible as Phil over here.
Do what?
So I may not know as much of the Bible as Phil over here, but I may know more than the person next to me and can help them.
Like one of the things about Phoebe that we talked about earlier, Paul warned the brethren to be ready to help her when she has a need. So a part of the definition of a servant is somebody who seeks out others to help serve. That's the direct relation in that unique job setting.
Yes, that's just one of the points in here is about not waiting around to be asked, right?
You create other servants. When you're a servant, you create other servants.
You don't wait around to just kind of hope they don't ask me to do anything, hope they don't do that. We always kind of laugh when we go back to our parish church in Arkansas. You're a visitor. They're calling you up to say the prayer every time without, you can be 5 minutes later to come up and take place. And we always kind of joke about it. Well, I try to make sure he walks in ahead of me so he gets to ask me. True service. I said I'm still working on it. I'm not sure I'm gonna work on it. But it's just that it's always been funny for us. To be that kind of rotate turns. But being a servant at this point, being a servant, somebody who just sees a need and fills a need, not just waiting around hoping they don't ask, hope they don't look at me, hope I keep quiet. Don't make eye contact with anybody. Don't make eye contact with Carrie or John or Luke or anybody else that's doing class. I got you this time. Go ahead.
A tool that we don't use a lot, which I think is new converts. Teaching is the best way for them to learn. That might be, as the second, the assistant. But I don't think, I think we are hesitant to ask them because we don't want to embarrass them or whatever. But I have talked to many people who said, especially those who were not raised in an environment, that teaching, they learn more, and literally more than the kids did. So just a word, ask some of the newer.
Ask a new convert to hop in and teach a class.
Well, be an assistant.
Be an assistant. Yep. Good one. Okay.
I'd say some of the biggest work that needs to be done, especially in a larger congregation, is connecting with other people. And so while you may not be still qualified to teach class, and some people probably aren't, that's fine.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
the biggest thing to do is, can you have somebody over your home? That's what greases the wheels of, maybe that's what your start is into teaching. Maybe that's your start into just finding out whatever it is that you can be helpful. But I think that once you build those relationships, once you're in each other's homes, then a lot of those other boundaries, the concerns, the anxieties that you have about those things, they really kind of fall apart. And I think that's a really easy thing to do. And it doesn't have to be, I'm going to have 3 families over. Just have one couple, whatever. Make that just kind of start making that a thing that you're doing in your own home. And that pays dividends, because then when something else comes up, you know what those needs are for that person.
But you sort of be a servant at that point because you know them.
And they may come to you with more things, and other people start to do the same thing. And I think that's a very overlooked, especially when we start talking about in a congregation of our size. That's really overlooked. And also, like, we kind of glamorize public worship and teaching stuff that happens in the building a lot, and forget about some of the most important work, which is what all happens outside of the building. We're only here for 3-4 hours a week. There's so much more work that has to be done outside of that.
I agree. I think I talked to you guys about this when I coached, baseball at Rossville. One of the verse that I made sure my kids knew from the very beginning was Proverbs 27:17. You might know what that verse says? Off your head?
Friend loves it all the time.
No. As iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. That was kind of the point that I wanted to get across to the guys, with that if everybody's making everybody else better, we're all going to get better as a team and get better at our positions and all those kind of things. That's kind of the idea that comes to mind whenever you're talking about getting to know one another. Have people into your home. You're making them better, they're making you better, and you're helping somebody break down all those barriers of maybe uncertainty. They're maybe new to the church and they may not know people. Well, it's kind of hard for them to step into a role and be a servant for anybody. They don't know people, they don't know the needs, those kind of things. But this kind of idea comes to my mind about making everybody better across the board. We all get better together.
relates to this. But I was thinking back to when you were talking about the children, and one of the qualities of children is that they still know they need someone, they're reliant on someone. And often as Christians too, we maybe unintentionally lose that reliance on God. We know enough now, we can do stuff. We don't, but without realizing it, we think that. And so this is that other tricky part of servitude, right? We want to serve by teaching, and then we start thinking, well, I'm a teacher, so I know a lot. And then we come to services and then start judging others. Well, I didn't get anything from what they gave me. And so humbling ourselves to realize that we still need to learn. We still have things we need to do, and finding, it's God's word. It doesn't matter who's teaching, you can find the nugget of truth that you can take home. And just humbling yourself to that, like, it doesn't matter if the person teaching you or leading the phone meeting or whatever is better or worse than you. If you're trying to serve God, there's something you're gonna take away.
Yep. So a lot of people in the church that will do a lot of complaining are the ones that aren't stepping in to do anything, to be part of it, to help, to make things better. I think that's something we've probably seen more than once, I'd venture a guess. But yeah, if you're gonna, yeah, to your point, I think that's very accurate. If you're gonna, be somebody's gonna, judge other people for not doing certain things. Okay, what are you doing to help out? The singing wasn't great, it wasn't good enough. Maybe not. Was the part in it? That's what matters. Who cares how it sounded? It's your heart that matters. But you can't judge somebody for that kind of thing. But what are you doing to make it better? Are you trying to make things, trying to encourage that person to maybe strengthen themselves as a song leader, whatever that may be? Really just sit there and point fingers and complain instead of doing something about it, I guess. So, good point. It wasn't random, that's good. I want to get to the, kind of hit on a lot of the points, about, back to point C here, breakthrough in our Christian life occurs when we make a life-changing choice to serve others. Again, most of these lessons in this book are about choosing to make decisions that Christ-like, that make you Christ-like in these decisions that you make. That's kind of the idea here. I wanted to get into some of these discussion questions real quick while we have time. Read the first one. Class in medical school was given a pop quiz. The test was relatively simple until the last question. What is the name of the woman who cleans this building? Students thought the question was a joke. One young lady handed in her paper and asked if the last question would count towards her grade. Absolutely, said the professor. He went on to say, in your career, you'll meet many people, and each is significant. Every person on any level deserves your attention and care, even if all you do is learn their name and say hello. The young lady later wrote, I never forgot that lesson. I also learned that her name is Dorothy. How does this story relate to the local church? The people in this building we don't know the names of? I'll answer that for you. There are people that we don't know the names of. So how does that story relate to this local church here for us? What are we doing to get better at it?
Like 1 Peter 4:7 or 4:9 says, be hospitable.
Yep.
Right? And I think the point was made earlier. I know it's a challenge. I know it's easy on one hand, but super challenging on the other. So you have to be honest with yourself and say, what I have going on at home, what I have going on in life is not more important than me spending time with my brother, my sister.
It's simple, not easy, right?
Yeah, you got to put yourself out there. Yeah. You have to be honest with yourself, be humble, and accept the reality that if we don't change it, it's not going to change. And I think it's a bigger deal than we make it. I'm speaking to myself first.
I think we're all pointing fingers at ourselves, going, we all got to do better at that particular thing, and get to know people that maybe are quieter, that don't maybe won't necessarily be people, which is fine. It's a personality, but we still need to go up and at least know something about them, know their name, at least be able to say hi to them and have a connection with them. That's something we all get better at. Luke's point, have them in your home. Doesn't mean you have to have a big party. Doesn't mean you have to have multiple families. Have one family over and just talk, get to know each other. I think when Dan and Kelly first moved here, we were going to have them over to the house. I was like, we don't have any anything really good for. We just had sandwiches. That's just, it was white bread and turkey and.
I think it was hot dogs, because Kelly was like, hot.
Oh, it was. We ran out of turkey, I think, so we had hot dogs to back it up. So when you have hot dogs as a backup, That's a solid night, too. I wouldn't mind a hot dog and number 2, how has your life been affected by selfless service of others? I'm sure everybody in here's got a story about somebody that's served them in some way. Does anybody have one they would like to share? Anyone?
Oh, I can.
I'm just kidding. Anybody think they want to share? About somebody
Well,
that's been
I
affected?
will. When Mabry was diagnosed, she had this high, like crazy dietary restriction that was just out of this world scary, where she couldn't have anything left over. I mean, there was all these rules. And Shannon, I'll never forget that. She was at Costco and she called me. I bet she brought me a week full of food that just, and it was just all easy stuff that's nothing, she even didn't have to prepare anything. It was just stuff that I could pull out of crackers and so many people did that.
Hot dog and sandwiches?
I remember Jan Mars, Mabry was in the 2 and 3-year-old class, and she couldn't come to class, and she brought her all the stuff they were doing in class. I mean, just those simple things that you never, I don't know that I would have thought of, that just made, I mean, that was 10+ years ago. And it does, it gives you just an opportunity to help other people, and those people will never forget those simple things that you did for them.
Yeah, people like Jan and Brent do a ton of work behind the scenes that will never be talked about. I'm talking about it right now, obviously, but they do a lot of that kind of work. Gina's another one that does a lot of stuff behind the scenes. Some people in here do a lot of work behind the scenes to help other people, and they're very selfless about it. Yes, ma'am.
Just because she's on my mind, Kathy Foy, she doesn't have family here. She's very quiet, and I think about her all the time because she's one that's not gonna let you know.
She's very,
And I
very
think
selfless about it.
now is the perfect time to serve her.
Yep, I agree. Who in here has had a birthday song from Neil Simpson? Everybody in here, right? We're with him last night. He said he sends over 550 songs a year. He sends those songs out to everybody. 550 songs a year that he sends out. Him and his ukulele. Better than all people, but he's just making songs. But that's a really impressive thing for anybody to do. 550 times a year. He was like asking us last night, what's some memories that you have? And that's one that I definitely have myself. That's a big thing that may lift you up on your birthday to get a song from Neil. And think about what he's going through right now in his family. What can we do to help somebody like Neil who's been a Phoebe and helped other people? Time's coming to help Neil out. Yeah.
Going along with that, the servant acts to be so small, and I think we talked about this in the ladies' class recently with young moms, but I mean, I still remember from Andy and Allie being like 1.5 as a newborn, and I was at church when you had swing shifts, so I would be there sometimes with just both kids, and one was crying, and as soon as one would stop, the other was screaming, and like I was just up and down, and like you could see it on my face, like it was a true, and I know every mother has been in here going, I don't know why I'm here, like, but I just had one dear friend who, not even another mom, who just came up and said, you are doing amazing, keep it up, and it is still, like, it still like just means so much to me that they just even notice that like this is a big deal. So just a word and knowing what other people are going through.
It's a small thing, right? A small thing makes a huge impact. All right, guys, that's it for me. Dennis is going to be teaching Sunday on choosing to stand. Some of our